this whole Chrome tab. Okay. Can you see that all right?
Yep, we can see it perfectly fine.
Perfect. I realized I need to do the window actually. Hold on. Okay, better. Right? You can see it?
Yep.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you for joining, everyone. Everyone's on the East Coast, or Cincinnati's at Central Time, so 4 p.m.-ish.
We're East Coast, so it's at 5 p.m. here.
Okay, cool. Geography is definitely not my strong suit, but good evening, everyone. My name is Lily. I'm a developer advocate here on the student programs team on Postman. And I'm going to be spending this hour and a half with you talking about API fundamentals and how we can use them with Postman. Throughout the presentation, you're going to see these QR codes on the top right or the top left. And this is a training that my team specifically creates and puts out for students all over the world. So if you're ever curious, I will share a little bit about it too, but you can feel free scan the QR code and learn a little bit about it too. A little bit about me. I am Lillian Nosay. I'm a new developer advocate here on the student programs team, as I mentioned before. I'm also a University of Maryland alum, and a little bit about me after I graduated, which was about a year and a half ago now, so not that far out. I worked at Google for a little bit, and then I landed here with Postman, and I really love being at Postman because I get to work with students on the ground on a daily basis, so I really love having that connection and getting to work with students and code at the same time. So yeah, if you have any questions about any of that, I would love to answer them. And about our mission here at Postman. I also love Thai food, I have a cat, and I love trivia. So what we're going to be talking about today is a big, broad spectrum of things. Anything from what I do on my team and what our team does. We have 3 different programs that are going to be of interest to you. So we have the Student Expert program, the Student Leader program, and also a classroom program. I'm going to teach you all about that and what we do here. Also, more about API fundamentals. What is an API? What does it even stand for? Maybe APIs behind the scenes, client servers, the request response pattern, anatomies of those requests and responses, and then we're going to try things out. And I'm going to show you a couple of different collections that we can try out, what Postman looks like behind the scenes, and then we're going to do some follow-up resources along with a swag challenge, which a lot of people love. And yeah, I'm going to be here for a lengthy Q&A if you want. So just to dive right into it, I'm just going to get this out of the way. Postman student programs, I think this is a biased take, but I think we have really great programs that you should utilize, especially in university. APIs is something that might seem really daunting for a lot of students. I know in high school, I completely didn't even understand the concept of APIs. Going into college, freshman, sophomore year, it was still really fuzzy. Like I knew what APIs did, but working with them seemed really, really confusing. There's also tons of barriers of entry. There's a lot of weird authorizations, OAuth 2, OAuth 3, all these scary terms. And I think it wasn't until I really started working at an internship and getting industry work that I got to realize that APIs are so integral in our working industry life. And you'll have to get used to it no matter what. So working with APIs can be easy if you use the right tools. And also another biased take, but I believe Postman is the easiest way. And not just me thinks that. So Postman is a collaborative API platform, if you don't know what it is. And it's totally fine if you don't know what it is. It's totally fine if you don't know what an API is, honestly. And it's great even if you do know what an API and you know how to use one. Very accepting of all different skill levels here. Hopefully we can all come out of this workshop with something new that we've learned. But yes, this is an API platform that simplifies creating, using, testing, anything to do with APIs with the UI. We also recently acquired Akita, which is some API monitoring tool. So we're a very big growing brand, and also 98% of Fortune 500 organizations use Postman. So if chances are, if you go into an internship, you start working at a job, they're probably going to be using Postman. And you'll notice that these companies really, really span across industries. So Uber's here, that's tech technically, but we have lots of things. Like Kroger, that's a whole food brand, like Comcast, a Capital One. So all of these companies all use Postman and they're completely diverse. So We have more than 500,000 organizations, and we just passed the 20 million developers using Postman, which is huge, very huge. So it doesn't hurt to start getting familiar with Postman, getting to know API development with Postman, and it'll just give you a leg up for when you actually start working in the industry. And this workshop really covers the basics and the fundamentals of APIs, but if you ever wanted to learn a little bit more about how you can use Postman to its full advantage and also learn how to test, how to script within Postman, how to really work with more advanced APIs, all the cool ones, you can learn how to do that with Student Expert. So Student Expert delves into a lot of more advanced things, advanced requests, editing documentation, test scripts, as I mentioned, running collections. And also, once you finish the Student Expert program, you have the chance to become a student leader on your campus, which is always a great resume booster. And I would say, why not just apply sometimes? So the Student Expert is a free certification that we provide and we completely support. So it shouldn't take you very long. And why not just have another certification on your resume while you're at it? And going into what is an API? We've been throwing around the term API a lot, but what does it actually mean? So before we get into the definition directly, these are 4 images involving different types of platforms. So the first one looks like just a generic user login. The second one is Spotify, which we all know and love. C seems to be some kind of pay system. And D is some kind of messaging system. Just from a guess, which of these services do you think involve APIs? Just shout out a letter, put it in chat, whatever you think. Oh, yeah, that was fast. It is a trick question, but usually, yeah, in the case where someone's asking which of these services, multiple choice, it's usually all of the above. So it is all of the above, and it's just to show you that APIs come in all different forms and flavors. So I will show you now the definition. So APIs are application programming interfaces, which seems to be more of an intuitive name than most. And intuitive is kind of okay. Like if someone told you application programming interface, I'm not sure if I would get that from the first go. But really, I like to think about it as a menu of interactions that you can do with your program itself. So that's where it kind of becomes intuitive. But yeah, so the other definition we have is a contract that enables code to talk to code. And really what APIs excel in is enabling services to communicate with each other. So this really goes for automation, integration, and then also for businesses to open up product features for faster innovation. So all of your favorite companies like Twitter, previously Twitter, really had a really famous API that a lot of developers use, and you've probably consumed on your own. So there would be bots, which were very famous. Infamous, I guess, would be the term, but there would also be really great bots that were helpful. So for Twitter, really big thing that was working with their API were devs with metro systems or like your public service, public transit updates. So people would update, for example, the New York subway. They would say, okay, so the New York subway is running like 10 minutes late, and they would hook up to the Twitter API and then post those updates. And people really relied on those. Obviously, there's been some complications with it since, but that is really how businesses open up their product. Otherwise, no one would have access to Twitter to be able to post things automatically like that. So it really adds for automation, all that good stuff. So there's lots of other companies that I'll mention later, but that's a really famous example. And there really is an API for everything. When we go back over here, I told you that all of these are APIs or using APIs. The first one, I can't tell you an exact one, but the ones that are listed up here, GitHub, Instagram, Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, how do you think they all log in? It's probably using an API from each of those platforms, and they have an endpoint that allows you to enter some details and then just push a request and then log in through their platform. Spotify has their own API, which I'll actually show you today in the presentation. See, there's a lot of payment systems. The one that comes to mind is Stripe. And the last one, that seems like a messaging system. The one I know off the top of my head is Twilio. So there's a lot of different options, and there's tons and tons and tons of APIs. And there are some here. So there's Twilio. that I have listed for SMS services, weather APIs, which is a really good example of a free API. We have Stripe, which is payments, as I mentioned, Discord and Slack, which are really, really popular. Discord bots are super, super useful and versatile. And chances are you've probably worked with one before if you've ever been on Discord. SendGrid sends emails automatically for you, or you can automate email sending. Spotify, Twitter, Facebook, Google, so much more. And just to show you how many more, I will, if you have access to the slide deck, you can look at this link too, but this is just a really, really big GitHub repository full of however many APIs. I have no idea how many APIs are in here, but it's a huge, huge list, and I think they're all free. I'm not sure if this is still really maintained, but whenever I'm kind of looking for an API, I go to here. And some of them are really stupid, like, I don't know, what was it? Like random dog. There's just random pictures of dogs, but it's really fun to play with. And honestly, if you ever want like a really small side project, or if you're really struggling on like ideas for hackathons, I would recommend coming here, honestly. Or if you ever want to just go on ChatGPT or Bard, just search up like, I want an API for this topic, and it'll spit something out for you. So there's a lot in here. I highly, highly recommend looking through here if you ever need some inspiration. But yeah, there's so many APIs. All right, going back. To really appreciate what Postman does, I need to kind of take you back in time. And not really back in time, but back to a time without Postman, which admittedly wasn't very, very long ago. So what Postman is to us today is really essentially a wrapper on top of something very low level. So you can see on the left, there's always the option of creating an API request with the curl command line. And you can still do this to this day. But what it looks like really on the left-hand side is you're going to be doing this in the terminal. You're going to be making, this is all one API request, by the way. This one command, which is on the first line of this terminal, and then the response is all there. And you can tell it's pretty ugly. It's kind of hard to decipher. And yes, you can learn it. You can get used to it. But if you make a ton of API requests, you're going to be getting lost in the console. You're going to either need many, many tabs or something. It's just not the prettiest. So yeah, so now that's why we really appreciate Postman, which on the other hand, on the right-hand side, is super, super sleek. I'm a big aesthetic girl. I love how it looks personally, and everything is super clear on where things should be. So I will also show you an example of a really, really basic request in a little bit. And there's a lot of automated tools within Postman that really help the API process. So yeah, just be grateful. We can always use curl command lines. And the great thing about it is that some people do use curl command lines when referencing API requests, but you can also import them into Postman if you ever need to. So that makes your life a lot easier. And all right, so I'm going to navigate over to our actual workspace, and I'm going to also send the link to this right here. No. Okay, this is the link to our workspace. But this is essentially what Postman is going to look like for you. So we have it here. I'll start over here at the workspace. This is the title page where you can have documentation here. And on the left here, you'll have collections. So the way that Postman is really organized is that on the bigger circle, you have a workspace which can hold a ton of different collections. And then within each collection, I tend to have a different type of set of requests. The great thing about Postman, the thing that I didn't mention before with curl command lines, is that we're really collaborative in that sense. So this can be shared. The fact that I sent a link to all of you and that you can open it and access all of the requests that I have is really cool, and that really unique to Postman. So we have these collections here. They're not all related, but they are just cool collections for you to use if you want to come back here and work with it, play with it a little bit, but these are going to be for our demo purposes. So really, I just want to get you familiar with how you really navigate Postman. So I already have one collection here, but I'm just for an example's sake, I'm just going to create a new blank collection. And I'm going to call this Google V2. So why did that not work? Okay. Okay, so it was just slow for some reason. All right, so that's how you make a collection. Now within the collection, you can make some requests. So this already made a request for us. And it'll default to new requests, but I just want to say search. I don't know why my internet's being weird. Okay. All right, so it works on the second try. Let me explain to you what we're doing. So I opened up google.com. Google.com looks like this. The funny thing is, if we open up inspect and we go to network, let me refresh the page. These are all actually requests. And that's exactly what we can take and study a little bit. So I'm going to show you the most basic example. I'm looking for the one request that, if I go to all, I'm looking for google.com. It's a new tab. Oh, this is a new tab. So apparently that's different than just typing in google.com. Okay, that's strange. But this might be really, really tiny to you, but you'll see that there's a www.google.com and there's a ton of requests in here. And Google does a lot of weird things behind the background, but the one thing that's going to be important for us is just to look at google.com. And you'll see in the response, there's a few different things. You can see the headers, you can see the 200 OK status code. It's a GET request, and the request URL is google.com. So how about this? I'm going to take that URL and paste it in here. Make sure there's no new line because that's a little wonky. And I'm going to save it and I'm going to send it. So the same thing happens here. We're going to get a 200 OK status code. You'll see that it takes 216 milliseconds and that the size of this response is 23 kilobytes. So looking back over here, why did we care about that again? And I'll zoom that up a little bit. So this is the response that we get from just, they're hitting the endpoint of google.com as we just refresh this page. So we're looking at the response here, and this is basically all of the HTML that we're getting back in the response for this particular request. So if we go back over here, this is the same request URL that we just saw in that inspect section of google.com. Now let's see our response. Our response is going to be in the body here, and you'll see that it's identical to that thing in the spec that we were just looking at. And you can analyze this all you want. You can run it through a diff thing, but I promise you it's the same. And the really cool thing is that if we go over to preview, although there's no CSS edit formatting or anything, you'll see that the HTML is completely the same, and you'll kind of see what it's supposed to look like. All right, now that's all cool and everything. So this is the request URL, and we can name the actual request here. And we can also edit the things, but we saw that it was a GET request from the network, so we can just do that, and then we just have to send it. Now what happens, actually, let's go back to the presentation, and I'll show you everything later. So what's really going on behind the scenes? I told you a little bit about that, but how does this really work? And an analogy that we use really commonly about APIs is about a restaurant analogy. And the reason we use this so much is because it works really well and it just makes sense. So there's three people involved. There's the user, which is going to be you, an API, and which is the waiter in this situation, and then the chef or the kitchen, whichever one you'll take it as. So the chef is going to be the backend. And the way that I like to think about it is that, remember when I told you an API is kind of like a menu? In this case, the API is a waiter that has access to the menu. So as the user, you don't know how to make your favorite dish. Let's say your favorite dish is, I don't know, like a spicy chicken sandwich. You don't know how to make the spicy chicken sandwich. You don't have the ingredients for a spicy chicken sandwich, but you just know that you want it and you know it's on the menu. So the waiter is going to say, the waiter doesn't know how to do either things, honestly. So the waiter's not going to be responsible for choosing something off the menu, and it's not going to be making anything. It's just going to be the messenger between the two things. So you as the user, you're going to take the API, or the waiter in this case, the waiter's going to take your order, and the waiter's going to take your order. So I say, I want the spicy chicken sandwich. The waiter's like, okay, that's on the menu. I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that back over to the chef, and the chef's going to prepare it. So what the waiter just did there is take your request. And as the waiter takes your request to the back end, which is the chef is going to take that menu order and start cooking, start making its thing. When it's done, it's going to send back that spicy chicken sandwich to the waiter. The waiter does nothing but just deliver it back to the user. And that part is the response. And so in a more technical sense, this is what it's really going to look like. So the user, as yourself, is going to typically be a client. So the client can be in many different forms. It's usually a browser or some kind of thing where you do some kind of input. So let's say you click a button and you want to see like the page reload or something. So that's going to be a request to our API. Our API is then going to take that and then send it over to our server, who really makes all the changes. And then the server sends it back through our API layer, and then our API layer sends back the response of the data that we actually need. So that could be anything from the actual page reloading to a field updating, or to sending over data, or sending you a file. So it's really versatile, but really it just goes through that request response pattern and all through the layer, the middleware of APIs. APIs, I love to think about it as a menu, and it typically is kind of like a menu, and I'll show you what the API docs look like. Any good API is really dependent on its documentation, so that's really what it's relying on. So pulse check. I know there is a hackathon coming up, so what are some examples of APIs that you come across? Or in the case that you've worked with APIs before, what are some APIs that you've really, really liked working with? Just to kick off, I know I've been working with Hugging Face recently, and Hugging Face has been really, really cool. Yeah, it's almost like OpenAI. Microsoft Graph API, Swagger UI, nice. I've used OpenWeather API. Yeah, I know I always get OpenAI whenever I ask this question. Someone's always, yeah, Hugging Face is really cool. Do you know which model you've been using? And this is a sneak peek. Well, not really sneak peek. It comes out tomorrow, but this is some exclusive knowledge. We're actually launching a project tomorrow for students that is about the Hugging Face API, and we're doing an AI text summarizer full stack app. Oh, cool, nice. All right, cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing. But yeah, there's a lot of APIs. So feel free to explore a little bit, and thanks for sharing those. I haven't worked with some of those, so. All right, so we're going to dig deeper into what really makes these requests and responses. So anatomy of a request. So we have a couple things that go into the request itself. We have the method, we have the endpoint and path, we have parameters, and we have headers and bodies. So the very basics. We have a method. So this really coincides with the CRUD method. So we have get, post, put and patch, and delete, which is more so of the create, read, update, and delete. So this is a drop-down menu that you can see in Postman, but get, they're pretty intuitive. So get is retrieving information. That's like how we saw on the Google page. And then we have post, which sends information. That's usually when we want to add data or update things. We have put and patch, which is updating information. And if we want to get really nitty gritty, usually when developers are creating APIs, they kind of merge the two, so there's really no difference. But if someone's super nitty gritty about it, put means, if I remember this correctly, put means updating the whole record. So that means every single thing in the record gets updated. Whereas patch is updating one tiny bit of it. So if you changed your last name, let's say I don't want to change your first name, I don't want to change your address, I just want to change your last name. So it'll go in, you'll just edit the last name only, and then it'll update. And that's a patch method. Delete is delete. Nothing really fancy there. So that is the first thing of the bare minimum. The second thing is the address of the server. And you've probably seen this before. This is kind of the breakdown of the server. So this is the protocol, which is HTTPS : the host, which is where the server is hosted on. So this is, and we typically refer to this whole thing as like a base URL. with the protocol plus the host. So, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. So you can see that the host of this google.com is www.google.com. And then the path is unique. So the path is really directing you where you want to be. So path, we want to specifically be on search and not somewhere else like /search/photos, for example. Yeah, this is the destination on the server where we want to read requests. All right, so going more into the parameters now. So let me go back after I explain you this, so this really adds specificity to a path. So we have query parameters and we have path parameters. So the first difference being with these parameters is that the query parameters really search for things. So we have a question mark that starts it, and we have key value pairs following it. So there's different syntax to the API documentation. So you can't really rely on all of just one true way of saying it. So like Q equals cat, that's not going to be the same for all APIs. But for the most part, you should be looking for a question mark and then a key value pair, and you'll know that that's a query parameter. But it's up to the API itself for documentation and the syntax of it. So in this case, you'll see that, oh, we're searching for a cat. We're looking for responses or for things only with a cat. And you can join multiple query parameters with an ampersand. After that, we have path parameters, which come after a slash instead of a question mark. And these are more dynamic. These are great to show ID values. So these often change. Now going back to the actual Google here. So back to this collection, I'm going to add a new request. I don't want to add a new, okay. So here, add a request. And instead of this, let's search up, let's see, what do we want to search? MakeUC. And here we'll look at the same thing. We'll look at inspect, network, and let me just do this again. So there's a lot in here. And here we'll see this request, which is search question mark, which I know is the one that we want. And it's going to respond with all of its HTML, which, spoiler alert, is this page that we're looking at. So we'll look at that. We'll look at the headers. And this is the request URL, which I can take. But also, it's going to be up here, too. So I'm going to just pull that. You'll see that it's also a GET request and that it returned to 200 OK. And that's really all the things, everything that we need. Everything that we need to go back into Postman, paste this in. And although that we don't know what really are the key value pairs, when we paste it in, you'll see that all of these pre-populated, which is really cool. And I still don't know what they mean, honestly. And you probably won't either, but if there is anything else, any other URL that you wanted to put in here, it'll automatically pre-populate for you, so you don't have to go through the hard work of going through the parameters and typing in each one individually. But we can see for this one exactly that Q and then MakeUC, just like we saw in that example syntax. So, and just for example's sake, if I send this, you'll see nothing for some reason. That's weird. Sometimes this does happen where usually I'll get a request though, so, or a response. Sometimes when I send a request too many times to Google, okay, so this happens, we get the response, and you'll see that this shows up just like that search page that we saw. So perfect. And we got lucky today because sometimes what will happen is that when you go to some websites or you see whenever you see a CAPTCHA, you'll always wonder, what is that for? I'm obviously not a robot. Well, in this case, we are kind of the robot. So be really careful when you're scraping data or if you're doing API requests on public sites like Amazon or Google. They're not very friendly about it. So there's nothing legally wrong with it, I want to say. But they will time you out and they will say that you will get blocked by a CAPTCHA at some point. So really rate limiting is your friend. So, and I'll talk about that later, but that's really just limiting how many requests you're making to a certain endpoint, especially when it's something huge like Google or Amazon. And there are workarounds around it, but I'm not sure if that's the most legal. But definitely referencing Google and Amazon just like a couple times is totally fine. But yeah, that's your fun fact of the day. All right, so going back over here. All right, pulse check. We just talked about it, but what's the main difference between query and path parameters? How would you know how to identify whether something's a query or a path parameter? Obviously, there's a ton of differences, but what's the symbol that would be, what's the symbol for a query and what's the symbol for a path parameter? Yep. Yeah. Yeah. That's like the main difference. You just have to look at it to see. Question mark is a dead giveaway for query. Path always slash. All right, and then getting into our requests again for headers. So you've probably seen this. We've also navigated to it before, but headers are they're more autofilled most of the time, but they are also key value pairs for non-payload information. And by non-payload information, that really means the body, the response, yeah, anything we're passing through. So an example of these would be authorization, which is a really big one, to be honest. So authorization would be some kind of bearer token or however we're authorizing ourselves to call an API. Cookie, content type, accept, or user agent. So these are all different types, and it depends on your API that you're using, whether you need to have specific headers, but you don't have to worry about these most of the time because sometimes they'll be pre-populated for you. And also the body. So the body is really important when you're doing primarily post, put, and patch requests. So these come in all different data types. So you can mostly JSON, I would say, is the one that I've come across a lot, but you can have it in form data, JSON, text, HTML, XML, files, even GraphQL. There's so many different types. It is really language agnostic. Um, so usually JSON is the one of my choice, but it is really versatile. And you can see that JSON objects are passed in through this format, which is usually wrapped around like curly braces and then wrapped with fields in strings and then set to other values. All right, so I'm not going to pain you through going through every single thing that goes into a request again, but this is more so of a reminder of everything that we talked about. So we have the body, we have the headers, we have parameters, methods, and endpoints, and I think that was the last one. So method, endpoint path, parameters, headers, and body, and you'll definitely run into these when you make your API requests soon. Now moving into responses now, we spent all that time on requests. Now we get to do the cool stuff with responses. So once we make a successful request, we should be able to parse through whatever we get in our response. And that's really what we use in our projects most of the time. So there's three things here. So less things that we need to really focus on, but more to do with it. So we have status codes. That's going to be your 200 OK that we've been looking at, 201 created and 404 not found, which I'm sure is very familiar to all of you. Headers, which is very similar to request headers. And then we also have body data, which is really the meat of everything. So responses, I think there's more here. So we have status codes, and you probably are familiar with them, but what you might have not known is that there are actually categories of each status code. So maybe you don't know exactly what a single status code means. So if you told me what 304 was before, I probably wouldn't know. But now that I have this chart, it goes by each 100 level. So 200s are successful. So those are usually the green ones. Those are okay, created, or no content, which are all very fine with us. 300s are a little bit of a weird one. They're not as common. So 300s are redirection. So 301 moved, 304 not modified. I'm not going to lie, I'm not sure if I've ever really seen those before, but 400s and 500s, I've definitely seen. So 400s are probably your most common ones that you've seen, besides success ones, but client errors. So you'll see 400 bad requests whenever you're working with APIs. This is probably something to do on your end. So I like to think about it like 400s are usually my problem, 500s are other people's problems. That is most of the time, unless you're handling the server yourself. So 400's bad request, that is something, maybe something's wrong with your parameters, something's wrong with your URL. 401 unauthorized, that means you don't have the authorization set up or you don't have the right key. You're simply just not allowed, you have restricted access. And 404 not found, you've definitely ran into this. Resources usually not found. 500, you can run into your usual ones like service unavailable, gateway timeout, that's come up a lot. But those are server errors, and yeah, so you can really determine, maybe you don't know exactly what each server code means or status code means, but you can definitely go off of this rule at least to determine, okay, is it my fault? Is it someone else's fault? That kind of thing. And within Postman, you'll see that you can see it on the response section. You'll see it on the top bar. And this really cool resource, my coworker loves this. This is status cats. If you ever want to learn about a specific status code and you don't want the usual wiki page or something really boring, you can go into here. So, and they'll give you a little cat picture, but they'll also explain it to you. So yeah, my coworker tends to use these pictures instead of actually putting status codes. So in her responses, she'll say, okay, just she'll call this API and then she'll post that picture in the response. So I'm like, okay, that's kind of cute. But yeah, that's a good resource too. Okay, but why do we think that status codes are important? Like, why do we use them? You can just take a guess. Or how status codes are important to you if you've ever used it. Yeah, that's definitely one of the reasons. To gather more information on API calls. Yeah, tells us if all the endpoints are set up correctly and our code functions correctly. Yeah, I mean, these status codes are really just an essential way of standardizing how we can read code and how we can debug things. So, as I mentioned before, people develop APIs and people make mistakes. So, all APIs are not created the same. Not all of them are going to be Spotify level or GitHub level or anything. So we have really small APIs and they might not even have documentation. So maybe you don't get any kind of response, maybe you have a straight error. And without status codes, you really have no idea what's going wrong. And this goes for you as a user too. So if you're using someone's website and you click a button and let's say you're trying to log in or you're trying to create like a user login for yourself. And maybe instead of, imagine a time when you didn't have like, okay, your password was denied for a certain reason. You didn't have that error message saying you're missing like a special symbol or something, and it's just denying you. That would get really frustrating, wouldn't it? And so developers use those status codes to really see, okay, it was a bad request or something like that. So the user didn't add a special symbol. So they can send something back based on that status code. All right, so now we're going to get to see other APIs. Now that we have all of those things, we looked into responses, we really saw all of that. And then I'm going to get to show you the body now. And I sent you that workspace link, so you can look into here. Now we're done with Google. I'm just going to get rid of this one. But if you want to look at it again, you can also look at this. All right, so we have a couple of different things here. I'm going to show you Spotify because I think it's pretty cool, just to start off with a really recent one. We also have a Postman API one that I'll show you, but this Spotify one is really cool, I think. So the authorization tends to be the most complicated part of APIs. So I'll show you the gist of it. So we have a ton of different types in here. And this is authorization based on a collection level. So usually you have to, whenever you make a request, you have to put an authorization for each one. But with Postman, you can put it at a collection level and everything else will inherit it from its parent, so to say. So for Spotify, they use OAuth 2, or you can use OAuth 2. And I see that I didn't refresh my token, so I'm refreshing my token. And there's a lot of different things. There's environment variables, which you can learn about more in the Postman Student Expert program. But if I go over here, you'll see that these are just set to variables, and these are secrets, so you can't see them. But they're set, I promise. This is probably the most complicated part, but if you can get past this, you can get through a lot of cool things. So I'm going to show you what good documentation looks like. I'm a big fan of the Spotify API. So the getting started is a little bit tricky, I will mention, but I followed a YouTube video and that was fine. So there's a getting started. There are concepts. So everything from access token, API calls, apps, all these things, these are all mentioned here. So there's tutorials and how-tos, but my favorite part is the reference section. So remember when I mentioned that good API documentation should read like a menu? This is exactly what I mean. So this is exactly like a menu. So whatever you want, it's categorized here. Let's say that I want to look into genres. I want to see, well, this one isn't really a fun one. This just gives you all the genre seeds. Let's see, something like audiobooks. I'm looking for a new audiobook. There's get several audiobooks. There's, I don't know if you can see this actually, get user saved audiobooks, save audiobooks for current user, check user saved audiobooks, get an audiobook. So some of these are going to be written out here. So you'll see exactly what you want. It'll describe it for you. And it'll tell you how you can create this. So it'll tell you what you need to pass in. So for this one, you'll need to pass in these two values or fields. So the ID of the audiobook that you want, the Spotify ID, and the market that you're looking in. So, and the really cool thing about this, and some cool things with other APIs, is that they'll usually have a build or request for you, or a request sample. So in this case, if you wanted to try it and I wanted to put like a new ID, I can just take this. This is the curl request, and I can copy it and I can import it actually. So I don't know which audiobook this is. I'm going to assume that it's fine, but let's see. Let me just copy it. I can take that request, go into here, and I can create, oh, I don't need to do that. I can just import it. I just pasted it. That's all I did. And you'll see that I have a new request here called nothing right at the moment. I just need to save it and I can change it. I'll put it under Spotify and I'm just going to say add audio or get audiobook. I think that was it. The only thing is I have authorization here, which is not the one that I wanted. But if I think it automatically takes your bearer token from your account once you're logged in and you have your developer account. So if I send that, it's a 200 OK. That's good. I can ignore that because it's not really my authorization. And then this is a random audiobook that they have for their sample. So, and you'll see in the response here, there's a lot of different things. This is a big JSON object. And I think you can convert it to whatever you want, but it returns a JSON object. You'll see that the author is Frank Herbert. There's a couple of different chapters, and I hope it doesn't show me every chapter. Oh, it does. Okay, chapter 4. There's no description. Usually you can see more fields, but these are all things that you can pull from this API response. And this is really the body of the response. So let me see. Usually there's good stuff at the bottom of these. So you can see things like the publisher, we can pull that directly, total chapters. So if we wanted to filter out, like we want short books or something like that, we can do that. The URI is there. So there's the description here. So I don't even know what the title is still. Yeah, so let's see. The novel, oh, is this Dune? Okay, yeah. Yeah, still can't find the title, but yeah, this has a lot of information. Maybe this wasn't the best example, but you can really parse through this, and I'm not going to go into how to really parse through the response. You can use JavaScript, and we have a test section where you can actually pull out things, set your variables, and really do a lot of advanced stuff with requests like this. So I'm gonna move on to the rest of the Spotify collection here. So we have really basic ones. I have the base URL set in a variable here, which is something I haven't showed you. This base URL is whatever the host is. So this is the server URL. So this is api.spotify.com. And I'm just putting the path here to v1 artist, and then I'm adding an ID here of an artist. And so this is going to look very similar to the other one. It's a lot shorter, so it's easier to explain. But we have things like images, the link to the actual person. We have 3 genres. Let me see if you can guess it. Dance pop, Miami hip hop, and pop. Followers, we have, what is it, like 1 million, around 1 million followers. And let's see. Yeah, so the name is Pitbull. The popularity is 81, which seems to be their metric of however they categorize popularity, which would be really cool to work with in some kind of project. And then we have the type, which is an artist. And yeah, so this is probably like the most basic request you can make. And going back to the reference here, you can go back over here, get artist, and this is exactly what it said. And for all of these, I kind of just took this and just copied it and put it in there. So it's super simple. You just kind of shop around for what you want, and then you import it in. And there's tons of really cool things. So here's browse new releases. So this will show us everything that's updated. I think if I go into here, get new releases of albums. Yeah, so this is the endpoint that I'm hitting, which is browse/new releases. And it takes in a country, a limit, and an offset. So I wonder what I did. I might have just put the default things here. But if I send it, it brings back a 200 OK, and it will return all of the newest releases of albums. So let's see what I put in the parameters. Did I not put anything? I might have put them in the header. I guess I didn't pass anything along. All right. So, oh yeah, so I said offset 0, limit 20. All right, and then I'm just gonna search through name. All right, so this is one. There's, oh, well, okay. Bigger houses. This is where you see the name of the actual album. Inside, you would get to the artist and more details about the artist. So that's where we hit the first name. But you can really parse through. You can run a loop, collect all of these new albums that released, and really go from there. So for each one, you can pull the actual ID, and then you can really plug that into different requests and make a chain of requests like that. And you'll see there's a lot more interactive ones. So here's an example for another post request that we haven't really hit yet. So we have a post request here. This one's actually different because it targets users, a specific user. So this is my specific Spotify account. And you can add a test playlist. So I can create a new playlist. This is the endpoint for creating a playlist. And all I had to do was add a body. I had no parameters. I just had to go into the body. And the 3 things I need to add is whether I want it public or not, a description, and then a test playlist. And I'm just going to say demo. And I'm going to say test playlist v2. And if I save this and send it, you'll see that it says 201 created this time instead of 200 OK. And there's a lot of things you can see here. There's obviously no image. You can see my username, the URI. There's no tracks in it right now. But if I wanted to add a track, I can take this ID, which should be here. So I'm going to take the ID, and I would need something. Oh, wait, what am I doing? So I'm going to copy that ID, and I'm going to save it for something else. So I'm going to go over here, shop around, and I want to actually add a song. So I want to add, let's see. So if I want to go to, let's see, artist top tracks. So let's see. I don't know who this artist would be. So I'm going to, before we do all of that, we're going to want to find something for adding adding a song for a user. So we can go back to users. That's where it's going to be. We're going to see if we can even do that actually. Playlist, add item to playlist. Here we go. And this might be difficult because I'm not sure, there's a ton of different authorization scopes. So you're going to have to do this. So let's see, post and URI string. All right, let's just test this out. And we'll see, add a request. Nope, JK. We're going to import it. So this is going to be adding a song. And we'll see in body that this is already added. We don't want the authorization here particularly. And let me save it. And let me go into here. So URIs string position 0. I don't know what that means particularly. So this takes in, this takes in, okay, we want the playlist ID. This is, yeah, and then position. So this will go to the 0th index already. URIs. So this is the comma separated list of Spotify URIs. Okay, so we saw the Spotify URIs. I'm actually just going to take a Pitbull song that we saw before because we already saw those URIs. And then for playlist ID, we already have that. So we just need to go into here and we don't need this. So let's go to Pitbull actually first. So get artist, save. We have it here. So where is the URI? We just want, actually, we're going to want a song from Pitbull. So we don't have a specific song from Pitbull. So we just want to go into here and go into, let's see, artist, get artist top tracks. I'm going to just take this. I'm going to copy this one again. And you'll see I'm just doing this off the fly. So all of this is should be super simple. Pasting this in, going back, deleting the authorization, saving, get top tracks. And for this one, we're probably going to have to put in the ID of Pitbull. So that's probably what I'm assuming. So if I go into, where was it, get artist, and I'll find the ID here. So, and you'll see how all of these really connect with each other. And this is a really manual way of doing it, but there are ways to really put them together without having to go in like this. So I'm going to just do this and hopefully this works. So missing country parameter. So where am I missing? Country. And going back over here, where do we put the country? Response sample. So market, so country code. And where would that be? All right. And okay, so we have, is it a GET request? So it's a GET request. And let's, missing country parameters. So country, is it country or market? We'll see if this works, but I didn't see it in there. So, all right, so I guess that was missing. And if we go into here, we'll see maybe one of the songs. So we have an album. I don't know if I want the album, but I'm not sure if that's going to work. But if we take a URI, for example, of maybe this, and I have no idea if this is going to work. This says, oh, this is, oh yeah. So this is going to be an album, artist, and it'll have a couple of things. So you really have to parse through. But if I go through this, for example, and we'll just take, this seems like a, okay, so this seems like an album, Planet Pit, and it has URI of the album, but I really want a song. So let me see if I can find URI. And this one seems like it should be, this is the artist URI. So we want to scroll through all the URIs before we see something like a track. So this is a track. We can say that this is the correct URI, and I'm going to just copy that real quick. and go back to our adding a song to the playlist. And this was a very, very long-winded way of getting our URI that we want to track, or our song that we want to add to our playlist at the end of the day. So, and this is going to be replaced by actually our ID of our playlist. So when we said, where was the create playlist? When we created our playlist, it came back with an ID, and I'm going to actually take that ID to add a song to the playlist. And I can put it back over here, save it, and here's a snapshot ID. And there's a 201 created. So I don't need to see it and check it to make sure that it's there. But although I trust it and that it's there, we can actually go to get playlist. I'll go to add my ID, and of course it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Maybe there's, okay, base URL, v1, oh. All right, yeah, the URLs are a little bit tricky, but 200 okay, that means the ID I got, and this returns back everything and says test playlist v2, my display name. And if we go into here, we'll see there's an album with, I guess it put in the whole album, but yeah, we'll see that there's a Pitbull album in here with all these different tracks. And if I go into my Spotify right now, there's probably going to be a really weird playlist right now. But yeah, that is a brief overview of how you really work with APIs with Spotify and within Postman and the different types of tooling. And that was a little bit long-winded, but that hopefully got you a big gist of how you would really see it in a dev setting. And just to really get you interacting with students with the things that we do at student programs, this is an API that we created also. Moving on to our Postman library API. So this is something that we created in-house. And the cool thing about it is that this is a very open library. So you can add books, you can get books, you can really practice the basics with Postman using this API. So we have everything from the basics of just getting books from our library. So I'll show you exactly what it looks like. Oop. Let me switch to no environment. And all right, I guess there's no book here. Oh, this is ID. So this is the most basic request that we have. This is our base URL, which is pointing to library-api.postman.labs.com. And if I submit that request, I have a 200 OK and a list of books in our library. And if you see a couple of duplicates of To Kill a Mockingbird, that is completely normal. That is just kind of our default that we have in our training program. So some people just tend not to change it, but if you can change it if you want. And there's a ton of books here that get cleared out daily. And if you want to, you can go through and add a book and people will see it. So I added this. This is from someone's previous books that they added before. But if I set this, you'll see that I was 201 created. And if I go back to get books, you'll see that this is the first one in the library too, so you can see that. So if you ever want to practice just posting, getting things, then you can do that. Also, if we want to look at IDs, so we worked with IDs a little bit before, but we didn't do it in this way. So you can really have a path variable by adding a colon and then just changing it up here whenever you need to. And then you can update books, you can delete books, and you can really use that in the Spotify API too. So that was something I didn't use. All right, and then I just wanted to show a little bit about the cool features of Postman too. Let me see if there's anything else in here. Yeah, so what is CRUD? So just tying this all back to the beginning, this is a really throwback to the beginning of the workshop, but what is CRUD and how do you remember it relating to the HTTP methods? And this is pretty much like a giveaway. If you remember what create, read, update, and delete is, that directly correlates to the HTTP methods, which is just get, put, patch, update, get, put, patch, delete. Yeah. And post. I was missing one. I remembered it. Yeah. So yeah, create, read, update, delete. Yeah, they're the basic atoms. And yes, so one really cool thing about Postman is that we have this new tool. I'm not sure if it's new actually, but we have a code snippet. So if APIs are super simple to you and you've been working with them forever, I would say that this is something especially for you. So especially when you're coming up on a hackathon, you don't really want to work with all of the debugging of really how do you call an API within your code base. Postman makes it really simple for you. So if I really wanted to use Spotify, I wanted to make a project with Spotify, and I wanted to get an artist. So I'm going to change the environment here. If you notice on the right-hand side, we have a ton of different tools here. On this side, you'll see something that says code, and it's in brackets. And if I drop this down, there's a ton of different languages. We can have this completely, this exact request integrated into your code within a copy paste. So I'm going to show you just like the fetch API, but you can use literally anything. So there's the curl, it can make it into a curl request. HTTP, Node.js is in here, all this good stuff. So there's a lot of things. PHP, Python. But if we wanted to, I'm just going to show you fetch. So it'll convert everything in here. So given this is a really basic request URL, but it'll take the authorization and it'll append it to your headers. It'll also take your request options. So it'll automatically say, this is a get method. These are my headers. And I also want you to go to this URL, which is the URL that you have in your request already. And the only thing you'll have to do is copy and paste this into your code snippet and then just handle the response as you would. And that is such a big time saver for whenever you're on a time crunch. And honestly, just save time whenever you can. So if you ever also just come across something that you really want to work with, there's a ton of different things. I think we're working on verification for the search thing. But if I want to go to, actually, no, let me stay in here. So if there's any API that you've ever been thinking about, so I know GitHub has a really big one. There's usually, if you ever see something by API evangelist, there is a really great chance that it's going to be so well documented. So there's these pre-made collections already, so you can see them. They're really highly documented. So there is, this one's a bit lengthy, so GitHub search users, and it'll have everything already made for you. So you would have to just fork. Same thing with my workspace, actually. If you ever wanted to fork anything, you can create a fork, add it to your workspace, and then you can manipulate it, and then you can start playing with it. And any other, what is another API? So like Twilio. Let's see, Postman Live. This one's a previous Postman Live. Sometimes you have to like kind of mess around to really see a public one. So this one works with, yeah, this one seems good. So there's find available phone numbers, buy a phone number, send an SMS, which is probably the most important one. You can take this exact request and then you can just copy it over. And this is an example of what a good response would be. So Postman's a really cool tool in learning about different APIs and really stealing basically other people's collections and getting to work with them directly. So keep that in mind whenever you're thinking of a project. And yeah, so we're really nearing on the end of this. Honestly, how many pages did I click through? All right. Going back to here, there's also one more thing that I want to show you. So we also rolled this out really recently. This one I know is really recent. So there's a lot of different features. I'm trying to fit them all into this, but here you can see this is a really random basic API. One of those APIs that I mentioned are really, really simple. And this has no authorization at all. This is a trivia thing. It returns questions and answers based on some parameters that you put in. And you'll see that there's science and nature, and also not that there's some answers. The cool thing is we also have a test section where you can visualize things too. Now, if I had this completely empty, we have a thing called Postbot, write scripts with Postbot, which is our generative AI test script writer. So we have a new UI for this actually. So we have some, let's see, I want a table. And this is new. I guess it's working on it, but it's going to actually take all of our response data and then transfer it into a table for us. And obviously this isn't the prettiest, but for someone who's a complete beginner, this is a really, really great resource for something in a pinch and just to really see the response data a lot easier. So whether this is for testing your own APIs or for actually creating something and posting it into your code base, this is a really great start for actually learning. And yeah, that is the last cool thing I want to show you about Postman. For anything else that you want to learn about, and if you're just a little bit curious, I would highly, highly recommend checking out the student expert program. And yeah, so these are some more resources. We have a YouTube playlist full of different videos for how to build different apps. We have tons and tons of videos of how to build apps with different APIs. We have the docs, of course. We have a pretty healthy forum page, and we have a lot of public APIs on the Explore page. Now, just to push student programs one more time, I'll show you the Student Expert program here. There's also the Student Leader program, which you would be eligible for after completing the Student Expert program. You can feel free to join. You can register on the QR code right now. I highly recommend getting to know that material first before going into working with different APIs. And then if you're ever curious about exclusive events, we have exclusive events for the student Discord community. We have hackathons that are internal to us. We also have new APIs that we've been testing with our team. Just lots of different testing for our programs. We're really interested in helping students grow and promote API literacy. So we love cultivating a really big community within our Discord. And yeah, this is the swag challenge. Thank you for staying through all of this. We have a way to win swag. So all you have to do is just submit something on Twitter or LinkedIn, your choice, and you just share your learnings with #PostmanStudent, and then just send the link to me with swag contest. And yeah, you have a week to submit something. Just make sure you send it to me so that I can keep track of it. But yeah, I would love to see all of your submissions. And yeah, so I've shared the link with you. Hopefully you can all see this after the workshop, but if you have any other questions, feel free to email me and or anything else. I will be happy to answer any questions you might have, but please leave some feedback here if you have any. And yeah, so I'm opening up for questions if anyone has any questions about anything at all. And if no one has any questions, I'm going to take that as everyone's got it, but yeah, it's totally fine. Thank you. Yeah, and if you have any other things that come up, if any of you are interested in the Student Leader program or Expert program, yeah, of course, yeah. It's always really great getting to present this at the beginning of a hackathon or before a hackathon because students can really get to use this during it. So yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the presentation. I know a lot of people here did too. We will definitely get your slides out to the rest of our members who weren't able to join us today and pass along your information. Thank you so much for presenting and being willing to work with us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. All right. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you.
All right. All right, then everyone have a great night then. All right. All right. Good night.
Good night.